Matthew Bell, you're Chief Executive of the UK Committee on Climate Change. Thanks for joining us here at the Runways UK event. Big challenges around carbon reduction that we face. I think it's 80% reduction by 2050. Does this recommendation for a expansion of Heathrow, does that help or hinder your case?
Well, the 80% reduction by 2050 is something that clearly has to be accomplished across the entire economy. And so there's roles for construction industry, for the power sector, for agriculture, as well as for aviation and transport more generally. The Committee on Climate Change doesn't take positions on particular projects, but it's very clear that if we're going to achieve a cost-effective way through to that 2050 outcome, that aviation will contribute along with other sectors.
So it's less about the expansion and more about making the industry more efficient.
That's right. It's about making the industry more efficient, and it's about the industry as a whole understanding the carbon budgets within which it sits and being able to take action, in some cases supported by government, being able to take action to achieve the efficiency savings and the efficient operation of aviation that will be needed in order to live within those carbon budgets.
Presumably you appreciate that, I suppose, for many, a project like Heathrow Runway 3, which possibly leads to a Runway 4, seems to go against the grain of trying to reduce our carbon emissions. Is that a difficult message to get across?
Well, I think the important message to get across is that step by step between now and 2050, we need to be reducing emissions for the UK as a whole. Now that will work differently for different sectors, and the Committee on Climate Change has said that for the aviation sector, a least cost path to 2050 is consistent with holding its emissions roughly at the level they were in 2005, which allows continued demand growth, about 60% demand growth from 2005 to 2050. And in order to meet that growing demand, the aviation sector as well will have to keep producing more efficient aircraft, more efficient aircraft routings, and more efficient use of capacity. And that's all for then the aviation sector to decide what the best mix of different technologies and different approaches to aviation are consistent with that emissions trajectory.
I mean, Howard Davis has, of course, included a lot of mitigation measures within his report. Because one of them is reducing or increasing the cut-off time in terms of when flights can land. Is that going to increase the amount of stacking that we might see above airports?
So I certainly am not the expert in the operation of airports, but what will be incumbent on the aviation sector as a whole, and one reason why in the report that we delivered to Parliament as part of our legal duties to Parliament and to the government, setting out where we are against our climate change commitments, one of the recommendations we made very clearly in that is that government should be setting out very clearly the actions and the plans that it will make in order to ensure that aviation delivers what it needs to deliver on emissions consistent with economic growth and consistent with our climate change commitments. And presumably part of that includes the efficient running of an airport and the efficient running of aircraft coming into that airport.
Right. So I suppose finally, looking at the kind of the politics that have got to be gone through before which you turn a recommendation into a decision, looking at the kind of objections that certainly the environmental lobby is going to be waging against this proposal. Do you think it's a deliverable scheme?
Well, I don't have a view on whether the scheme will be delivered, whether it's delivered or not. What I do have a view on is that the British government and as the UK as a whole, as part of global action to tackle the very significant risks of climate change, has signed up to this 80% reduction by 2050 on our emissions and for the UK as a whole. Aviation has its role to play within that, and the Airports Commission and Sir Howard Davis in his report has been very clear that he feels that the business case behind the third runway at Heathrow is compatible with also achieving our climate change objectives, which the Committee on Climate Change has set out very clearly. And as long as the two of those things marry up, then from that perspective it should be and can be done.
Matthew, there's certainly a lot of controversial and interesting decisions to be taken. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.